The wolf's jaw closes. Bone snaps. Tyr does not scream. He watches Fenrir's golden eyes and knows the price was fair. Blood falls on ancient stone. The other gods look away. Only Tyr remains facing the beast he promised would not be harmed. What kind of god sacrifices his sword hand for a wolf? What oath could be worth that much? Tonight we walk the path that led here. Tyr was once the highest god the Norse world knew. Before Odin, before Thor, there was a one-armed god of justice no one remembers. He gave his throne without bitterness. He gave his hand without hesitation. Some gods demand worship. Tyr simply did what was right. This is a story about the hardest kind of courage. Not the kind that charges into battle, but the kind that stands still and pays the cost. Some days ask more of you than anyone sees. Quiet sacrifices, promises kept when no one's watching. You've earned this rest. A story of courage begins. Get comfortable now. Settle in. If you fall asleep before the war god finds his peace, that's fine. He'll stand guard. That's what he does. If nights like these help you rest, subscribing keeps them coming. No pressure, just more ancient stories whenever you need them. Now, our tale begins properly. Long before the world tree grew its first leaf, the Norse carved their gods from ice and fire. Tyr was the blade they shaped first. His name meant, itself, not a god the god. Every sky father from Rome to India shares his ancient root. Tyr came first. In those earliest days, Tyr held the sky in place. He judged disputes between giants and gods. His word ended every argument. He never lied. In a pantheon of tricksters and schemers, Tyr's honesty was so absolute it became its own kind of power. Warriors prayed to him before battle, not for victory, but for the courage to face whatever came. Tyr promised nothing except fairness. Then Odin rose. The All-Father hungered for wisdom and paid for it with pain. His eye for knowledge, his body for runes, his peace for prophecy. Tyr watched his own era end without protest. A lesser god might have fought. Tyr simply recognized that the world needed something different now. He became the god you called when the stakes demanded honesty, when a contract needed a witness, when someone had to keep their word and mean it. And then one day, the gods brought a problem to Tyr that no amount of honesty could solve cleanly. They brought him a wolf. Asgard was young once. The golden halls had no dust. The gods had no enemies. And Tyr sat on the highest throne of all. His hall stood at Asgard's center. Carved into every pillar were the oaths he'd witnessed. Promises between gods, treaties with giants, vows that held worlds together. The sky answered to him. Rain fell when Tyr permitted it. Thunder spoke his judgments across the 9 realms. Even giants bowed to his authority. He governed not through fear but through trust. When Tyr spoke, every being in every realm knew the words were true. That was enough. But power shifts like seasons in the world of gods. Odin hungered for something Tyr never sought, knowledge of what would come next. Odin gave his eye to Mimir's well and saw the future. He hung 9 days from Yggdrasil and seized the runes. Each sacrifice bought him authority Tyr never claimed. The other gods noticed. Odin returned from each ordeal with answers they craved. Tyr offered justice. Odin offered certainty. The choice was easy. Tyr could have fought for his throne. He had the strength, the right, the loyalty of old allies. Instead he stood, walked to Odin, and offered the high seat. No war, no bitter exile. Just a god who understood that being right matters more than being first. Tyr stepped aside like a season changing. He kept his sword. He kept his sword. He kept his role as the god of oaths and justice. What he released was the need to be above everyone else. Centuries passed in Asgard like long golden afternoons. The gods built, feasted, quarreled, and loved. Tyr judged their disputes and said little else. Thor filled the sky with thunder and laughter. Freya's beauty lit the halls. Loki's cleverness entertained and unsettled in equal measure. Each god found their place. Loki especially drew attention. The trickster moved between worlds like smoke, sometimes helpful, sometimes cruel, always unpredictable. Even Odin couldn't read him fully. In the Iron Forest, Far from Asgard's warmth, Loki kept a secret. A giantess named Angrboda bore him 3 children the gods would learn to dread. The first child was Hel, half alive, half dead, her face split between beauty and bone. The gods sent her to rule the underworld before she could walk. The second was Geormungandr, a serpent so vast that when Odin hurled it into the sea, it grew until it circled the entire world and bit its own tail. The third child was different. The third child was a wolf, and unlike his siblings, the gods did not send him away. They made a mistake. They kept him close. Fenrir, even his name carried weight, a sound like something tearing open. The pup was small at first, dark-furred, golden-eyed, almost beautiful. None of the gods dared go near him. They fed him from a distance, watched his growth with mounting unease. All except one. Tyr fed the wolf by hand. Every day, he sat with Fenrir in the courtyard while others watched from windows, whispering that the god of justice had lost his mind. The wolf grew, each week larger, each month stronger. His shoulders reached Tyr's waist, then his chest, then his chin. Still Tyr came every morning. Something passed between them in those quiet mornings. The wolf understood that Tyr alone treated him as more than a threat. Tyr understood that the wolf knew. But the prophecy spoke clearly. The Norns at the Well of Erd had woven Fenrir's thread into the tapestry of the world's end. He would swallow the sun. He would swallow Odin whole at the battle called Ragnarök. He would break every chain the world could forge. The prophecy left no room for hope. Odin called a secret council. No feast, no mead, no laughter. Just the eldest gods in a locked chamber, firelight on grim faces, and one question: what do we do about the wolf? They could not kill him. Asgard's soil was sacred. Divine blood spilled there would poison the realm forever. The gods needed another way. Odin proposed a deception. Challenge Fenrir's strength, flatter his pride. Offer him chains as a game. If he breaks them, he proves his power. If he doesn't. Tyr said nothing during the council. He listened to every word. He watched friends become conspirators. When it was over, he walked alone to the courtyard. Fenrir slept by the courtyard wall, sides rising and falling like tides. Tyr sat beside him that night, one hand resting on dark fur, knowing what was coming. Did the wolf dream? Tyr wondered. Did monsters dream of open fields, of running without chains, of a world that didn't fear them? Morning came too quickly. The gods gathered. The dwarves had been summoned. The first chain, massive iron links called lading, lay coiled and ready. Thor arrived last, hammer in hand, his confidence filling the courtyard like weather. He dropped the chain at Fenrir's feet and grinned. A test of strength, he called it. Fenrir looked at the chain, then at the gods, then at Tyr. Something flickered in those amber eyes, amusement perhaps, or the first seed of suspicion. The wolf lay down and let them wrap the chain around his legs and body. He seemed almost bored. Then his muscles tensed. One motion, one breath, and lading shattered. Iron shards rang across the courtyard stones. Fenrir shook himself like a dog after rain and looked at the gods with something close to pity. The gods tried again. The second chain was called Dromi, twice as strong, forged with runes of binding hammered into every link. It took 12 dwarves to carry it. Fenrir considered Dromi longer. He circled it, sniffed it, tested a link with his teeth. The runes hummed against his jaws. He allowed himself to be bound again. This time he strained. His muscles bunched beneath dark fur. The chain groaned, the runes screamed with light, and then Dromi burst apart like brittle glass. Silence fell over Asgard. 2 chains broken. The wolf growing stronger by the day. Odin's fear deepened into something close to desperation. That night, a message traveled to the deepest forges of Nidavellir. Odin asked the dwarves for something impossible, a chain that couldn't be broken, because it wasn't a chain at all. The dwarves listened to Odin's request and smiled. They loved impossible things. 6 ingredients, they said, all of them things that do not exist. The Norse who first told Fenrir's story lived in a world built on oaths. A warrior's word was the foundation of everything. Law, marriage, alliance, Trade. Break your word, and you broke the world. A handshake sealed destinies. Men rode to war on spoken promises. Kings held power only as long as their oaths held true. Words were not breath, they were iron. Picture the storyteller 3,000 years ago, reaching this moment in Tyr's tale. Every listener knew. What Tyr would do with the wolf was about more than courage. It was about what makes society possible. Tyr's dilemma cut to the heart of Norse morality. He had built trust with a creature everyone feared. Now the gods asked him to weaponize that trust, justice against justice. The Norse didn't worship comfortable gods. They worshipped gods who suffered, who sacrificed, who faced impossible choices and paid the cost. That's what made them worth praying to. Deep in Nidavellir, the forges burned with purpose. The dwarves began their masterwork, the binding that would hold the unchainable. The sound of a cat's footfall. They caught it in a silver bell that never rang. A sound so quiet it existed only in the space between silence and less. The beard of a woman. Not that women couldn't grow them, but that the dwarves took the possibility itself, leaving only smoothness where potential had been. The roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, the spittle of a bird. 6 things that cannot be, woven into something that cannot fail. They called it Gleipnir. It looked like a silk ribbon, soft, thin, catching light like a spider's thread at dawn. The strongest binding ever made weighed less than a whisper. The dwarves sent Gleipnir to Asgard wrapped in a golden box. The gods gathered to examine it. Thor laughed. How could this thread hold what iron couldn't? Odin did not laugh. He held the ribbon to his remaining eye and saw the impossibility woven into its fibers. This would hold. But the wolf would know. Fenrir would sense what the chains could not do and a ribbon might. Wolves read deception like weather. They needed something beyond craft. They needed trust. Every god in the room understood at once. Every eye found terror. He was the only one the wolf trusted. He was the only one whose promise the wolf might believe. Tyr asked for one night, not to prepare, to say goodbye. He walked to the courtyard where Fenrir waited and sat beside the wolf one final time. The wolf's breathing was slow and steady. Warm fur rose and fell beneath Tyr's hand. Above them, the stars of Asgard burned like promises that had not yet broken. At dawn, the gods sailed to Lyngvi, a barren island in the black lake of Amsvartnir. The wolf came willingly. He still trusted them. He still trusted Tyr. The gods arranged themselves in a wide circle on the island's flat stone. Fenrir walked to the center, massive now, his shadow swallowing the ground beneath him. Thor stepped forward with Gleipnir draped across both palms. Another test, he announced. A game like before. Prove your strength. Break this ribbon. Fenrir's ears flattened. He circled the ribbon twice, sniffing the air. No iron, no runes he could see. Something far more dangerous. Something that smelled like nothing at all. The wolf spoke then, because wolves in the age of gods could speak, and his voice was deep as the earth cracking open. He said, "There is no honor in this game. If this thread is as weak as it looks, you gain nothing from my breaking it. If it binds me through craft, I gain nothing from being bound, unless someone offers a pledge." A pledge, the wolf repeated. A hand in my mouth. If the ribbon breaks, no harm done. If it holds and this was a trick, the hand stays with me. Fair is fair. Every god looked at the ground. Odin, Freyr, Heimdall. The bravest warriors in existence found the courage to fight anything, except this. Tyr stepped forward. His boots scraped the stone. The sound was the loudest thing in the 9 realms. Every god exhaled. The wolf's eyes found his only friend. They looked at each other. God and wolf. Friend and soon, to be enemy. Everything unsaid passed between them like a river no words could cross. Tyr raised his right hand slowly. Not the hand of a god reaching for a weapon. The hand of a friend keeping a promise he already knows will cost him everything. His hand entered the wolf's mouth. Warm breath, the scrape of teeth against his wrist. Fenrir closed his jaw gently, not biting, just holding, waiting for the truth. The other gods moved quickly then. Gleipnir wrapped around Fenrir's legs, his body, his neck. The silk tightened. The wolf surged against it, and nothing gave. Fenrir's eyes went wide. He pulled harder. The ribbon held. He thrashed, twisted, roared, a sound that cracked stone and sent birds from trees across 3 realms. Gleipnir held. The wolf understood. He turned his amber gaze on Tyr, the last honest god, and saw the truth. This was never a game. His only friend had led him to a cage. The jaw closed. Bone broke. Tyr's right hand was gone before the pain arrived. He did not fall. He did not cry out. He watched the wolf he had betrayed and accepted what he had earned. The other gods cheered. Fenrir was bound. Asgard was safe. They lifted their voices in triumph. All except the one-handed god who stood bleeding and silent on the stone. They drove a sword through the ribbon into the rock to anchor it. They placed a rod between Fenrir's jaws to hold them open. The wolf would howl until the end of days. Tyr sailed home alone. The celebration ship carried the gods ahead, their songs floating back across the dark water. Behind them, on the island, the howling never stopped. In his hall that night, Tyr removed the leather from his wrist and looked at what remained. The god of justice had paid justice's price, and the world turned on. Morning arrived in Asgard as if nothing had changed. The sun crossed the sky on schedule. Birds sang in the golden eaves, but Tyr's hall echoed differently now. He tried to grip his sword that first morning. His left hand closed around the hilt. Wrong angle, wrong weight, wrong everything. The blade clattered to the stone floor. A god of war who cannot hold a weapon. The irony would have made Loki laugh. Tyr picked up the sword with his remaining hand and began again. From nothing. Days became weeks, weeks became seasons. Tyr trained in his courtyard alone, always alone, swinging left-handed until muscle replaced memory and skill replaced instinct. The other gods kept their distance. Not from cruelty, from guilt. They had asked for this sacrifice. Watching its aftermath felt like staring at a wound they had caused. Thor visited once. He stood in Tyr's doorway, Mjolnir at his belt, and searched for words that didn't come. After a long silence, he simply clasped Tyr's shoulder and left. Odin never came at all. The All-Father sat on his high throne and watched all 9 realms. Except the courtyard where his son trained alone with one hand. The phantom hand troubled him most at night. He would reach for a cup and grasp air. He would feel fingers that weren't there close around nothing, over and over. Some nights, carried on the wind across dark water, he could hear Fenrir howling. The sound crossed realms like grief crosses years. Unstoppable and raw. Did the wolf howl from pain, from rage, or from something worse? The understanding that the one being he trusted had chosen duty over love. Tyr learned to dress himself one-handed, to eat to write, to pour mead without spilling. Small victories that no saga would ever record, but that cost him more than any battle. His reputation shifted. Before the binding, warriors prayed to Tyr for courage in battle. After, they prayed for something harder. Courage to do what must be done. The Tiwa's rune changed meaning. Once it meant victory through combat. Now it meant victory through sacrifice. The harder, quieter kind that leaves no scars anyone can see. Loki watched all of this with eyes that calculated while they smiled. His son was chained. His blood was imprisoned on a rock, and Loki began to keep a ledger of debts. The trickster visited his son once, slipping past Heimdall's watch. He stood before the bound wolf and made promises of his own. Darker promises, patient one. Fenrir listened. The wolf had learned patience from his chains. Where rage failed, waiting might succeed. Father and son shared a look that could swallow worlds. Years passed like water through stone, slowly wearing channels that no one noticed until the landscape had changed. Asgard grew comfortable. The gods forgot their fear. Tyr did not forget. Each morning he trained. Each evening he sat where he once sat with Fenrir. The empty space beside him never stopped speaking. He continued his duties. Oaths still needed witnessing. Disputes still needed judging. Tyr held the scales of justice with one hand now, and somehow they balanced truer than before. Perhaps that was the truth of it. A god with two hands can afford to be careless. A god with one hand must be exact. Every gesture matters when you have fewer to give. Across the 9 realms, mortal generations turned. Vikings carved the Tiwa's rune into their swords and shields. They named a day of the week for the one-handed god. Tuesday, Tiwasdig. Every week, in every tongue that descended from those northern roots, the god of sacrifice gets his name spoken without anyone knowing why. But in Asgard, time moved toward a fixed point. The Norns had woven Ragnarok into fate's fabric, and no god's sacrifice could unweave it. The end was always coming. Odin saw it first. From his high throne, the All-Father watched the threads tighten. He saw the signs written in stars and in the bones of prophets. Winter was coming. Not ordinary winter. Fimbul winter. The great winter that swallows 3 summers whole. Snow that never melts. Winds that cut through divine armor, the world's last cold season. In Midgard, the mortals suffered first. Brothers turned on brothers. Oaths dissolved like ice and fire. The bonds that held human society together frayed and snapped. Tyr felt each broken oath like a wound. He was the god of promises, and every betrayal in every realm registered as a dull H, where his right hand used to be. The sun grew dimmer each day, not gradually, in lurches, as if something were taking bites from its brightness. The wolves Skoll and Hati were catching up to their prey. The stars trembled. Yggdrasil groaned, a sound like continents shifting. The great ash tree that held the 9 realms was shaking, and its roots were coming loose. On Lyngvi Island, Fenrir felt the change. The magical ribbon Glipnir, woven from things that don't exist, had held for ages. Now, for the first time, it hummed with strain. The wolf tested the ribbon, a gentle pull, then stronger. For the first time in ages, he felt it give. Just slightly. Just enough to know that what binds eventually breaks. In Asgard, Heimdall's horn gathered frost. The guardian of the bridge stood at his post and listened. Not to threats approaching, but to the silence between threats growing louder. Odin assembled his war council. Not the secret whisper of Fenrir's binding. A full gathering, every god armed and grim. The All-Father spoke the word they all feared. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. Every deity in the room knew the stories. They had lived knowing the ending. But knowing and facing are different things entirely. Odin laid out the prophecy. The wolf would break free. The serpent would rise from the sea. Loki would sail a ship of the dead against his former friends. Each god would face a nemesis. Thor would battle the world serpent and both would die. Odin would face Fenrir and be swallowed whole. Heimdall and Loki would destroy each other. And Tyr, the one-handed war god, would face Garm, the monstrous hound that guards the gates of hell. They would kill each other where the dead meet the living. Tyr received his death sentence the way he received everything, with his eyes open and his jaw set. He had one question: how long do we have? Odin could not say. The Norns weave time in their own rhythm. It might be centuries. It might be tomorrow. The only certainty was that it would come. The council dissolved into preparation. Thor sharpened Mjolnir on a whetstone of sacred light. Freya polished her falcon cloak. Heimdall wielded Jallarhorn in silence. Tyr did something different. He walked past the armory, past the training grounds, past the golden halls, and stood at the lake shore where boats once sailed to Lyngvi. Across the water, too far to see but not to feel, the wolf waited. Tyr wondered if Fenrir knew what was coming. If wolves could sense the end of the world the way they sense a storm. He wanted to go to the island, to sit beside the wolf one more time, to say the things that language fails to hold. I'm sorry. I had no choice. I would do it again. He didn't go. Some distances exist for reasons. The space between them now held everything that couldn't be repaired. Trust broken for the greater good, love sacrificed for duty. Instead, Tyr prepared the way a god of justice prepares, not by sharpening his blade but by settling his accounts. Every oath recorded, every judgment completed, nothing left unfinished. He visited the Well of Erd one last time. The Norns did not look up from their weaving. They never did. But the water showed him something unexpected. In the water he saw a meadow, green beyond any green he knew, no snow, no chains, no swords. A place where something new could begin after everything old had ended. The prophecy promised destruction, but beneath the destruction, hidden like roots beneath snow, lay renewal. Even the Norn's darkest thread led somewhere beyond the dark. Tyr stood from the well with something he hadn't carried in ages. Not peace, peace was behind him, but purpose. The end needed a witness, and witnesses need the courage to watch. The wolves in Norse mythology are never simply animals. They are forces, hunger, chaos, the darkness that swallows light. But they are also children, born into a world that feared them before they chose to be fearsome. The Norse lived alongside wolves, real wolves, in the forests, on the tundra, at the edges of their farms. They respected the animal's intelligence and feared its hunger in equal measure. Fenrir's story asks a question the Norse couldn't answer comfortably. What happens when you create a monster by treating something like a monster? Is the prophecy cause or consequence? Every culture has its wolf stories. The Roman wolf that nursed Romulus. The Cherokee two wolves that live inside every heart. The wolf is always us. The part we chain and the part we free. Tyr understood this better than any god. He loved the wolf. He chained the wolf. Both were true. Both were necessary. That paradox is the beating heart of his myth. As Fimbulwinter deepened, the world forgot warmth had ever existed. Snow buried mountains. Rivers froze to their beds. The sun was a pale coin behind clouds that never parted. In Asgard, ice climbed the golden pillars like ivy. Mead froze in the cups. Even the eternal fires of the forges burned lower, as if fire itself was losing the will to fight. 3 winters came without summer between them. The prophecy counted winters, and mortals counted the dead. Each realm paid its tithe to the coming darkness. Tyr walked through the frozen halls and made himself useful. He settled quarrels sharpened by cold and hunger. He reminded frightened gods that fear was not the same as defeat. He visited the mortal realms too, walking among Viking villages in disguise, helping where he could. A frozen lock opened, a lost child found, a dying fire coaxed back to life. He never announced himself. The mortals never knew a god had passed through. That was the point. Help that needs an audience isn't help. It's performance. Back in Asgard, the tension gathered like water behind a dam. Gods sharpened weapons they hoped to never use. They slept in armor. They kissed their children longer. Freya wept golden tears that froze before they fell. Idun clutched her basket of immortal apples, the fruits growing smaller as Yggdrasil weakened. Even the animals of Asgard grew silent. Loki had vanished. No one could find him. Not Odin's ravens, not Heimdall's all-seeing eyes. The trickster had gone to gather his army from the places between worlds. Deep beneath the waves, Javermungandr stirred. The world serpent released its own tail for the first time since the beginning, and the ocean rose 20 feet in a single breath. And on Lyngvi Island, in the center of the Black Lake, Fenrir stood. For the first time in ages, the great wolf stood. Glipnir groaned, and began to tear. The sound carried across every realm. Not a howl this time, something deeper. A vibration in the fabric of existence, like fate itself taking a breath before screaming. Heimdall heard it first. His golden eyes widened. His hand found Jallarhorn. The bridge keeper drew the deepest breath in the history of the 9 realms. The horn sounded. Every creature in every realm heard it. In their bones, in their blood, in the spaces between heartbeats. The horn said one thing: it is time. Tyr was in his hall when the sound reached him. He set down the cup he was holding, his left hand steady as always, and stood. He already wore his armor. He'd been wearing it for days. He picked up his sword. Left-handed now. It had been left-handed for longer than it was ever right. The blade knew his grip. His grip knew the blade. They were ready. The gods gathered at Bifrost for the last time. Armor gleamed. Weapons caught the dying light. Every face carried the same knowledge. Some of these faces would not return. Thor stood at the front with Mjolnir crackling. Lightning arsed between his fingers, like a living thing eager to strike. The thunder god was grinning, because Thor always grinned before a fight. Odin rode Sleipnir, his 8-legged horse, the great spear Gungnir in his fist. The All-Father's single eye burned with everything he'd seen, and everything he knew was coming. Freyr drew a sword of light that hummed like sunrise. Heimdall stood with Jallarhorn and a blade forged from a fallen star. Every god brought their best and their last. Tyr walked among them without speaking. He clasped shoulders, met eyes, nodded. Every god he touched stood a little straighter. That was his gift. Not lightning, not prophecy, just the quiet assurance that what they did mattered. They marched across Bifrost for the final time. The rainbow bridge dimmed behind them, its light pulling forward, lighting their path to Vigrid, the plain where worlds end. Vigrid stretched before them, a plain 100 leagues wide, flat as grief, gray as ash. The sky above it had stopped pretending to be anything but a ceiling for war. From the south, fire. Surtur the fire giant led his burning army across the bridge of flame. Behind them, everything they touched became cinder and memory. From the east, Nagfar sailed. The ship built from the fingernails of the dead glowed bone, white against the dark water. Loki stood at its helm, his grin the widest weapon on the ship. From the sea, Jörmungandr rose. The world's serpent breached like a continent coming alive, scales the size of shields, eyes like twin furnaces. Poison dripping from jaws that could swallow the horizon. And from Lyngvi the howl. Gleipnir snapped with a sound like a harp string breaking in a cathedral. Fenrir was free. The great wolf ran toward Vigrid with his jaw unhinging. His lower jaw scraped the earth. His upper jaw touched the sky. Between them, everything was hunger and shadow and centuries of rage compressed into one open mouth. Tyr watched Fenrir approach. Even now, even knowing the wolf came to destroy everything, Tyr saw the pup he had fed by hand. Both truths existed at once. Both broke his heart. The Battle of Ragnarok began without a signal. It began the way real catastrophes begin. Suddenly, with everyone moving at once, and no time to think about what comes next. Thor found his serpent. The thunder god waded into the ocean of Jörmungandr's poison, Mjolnir raised, laughing. Because even at the end, Thor was Thor. Odin drove Sleipnir straight at Fenrir. The All-Father's spear flew true, but the wolf was too fast, too vast, too hungry. Gungnir vanished into Fenrir's throat like a needle into the sea. Vidar, Odin's son, avenged his father, tearing Fenrir's jaw apart with the strongest shoe in all the 9 realms. But that is another story for another night. Heimdall found Loki in the chaos. The Watchman and the Trickster, order and chaos, circled each other once, twice, and struck simultaneously. Neither rose again. Thor killed the serpent with one final blow. Then he walked 9 steps. Just 9. Before the venom in his veins finished what the serpent started. The thunder stopped forever. The world burned. Surtur's fire consumed Yggdrasil. The stars fell like snow. The ocean swallowed the land. Everything the gods had built was returning to the void it came from. And through all of it, through fire and flood and the death of gods, Tyr walked toward the gates of hell. His appointment was waiting. Garm howled from the darkness below. Garm was everything Fenrir should have been, a beast of pure destruction, no intelligence behind those burning eyes, no betrayed trust, no sorrow. Just teeth and hunger and the job of guarding the dead. Tyr drew his sword, left hand steady. The blade caught the fire of the dying world and held it. One last reflection of light in a realm going dark. Garm charged. Tyr did not dodge, did not retreat, did not hesitate. He met the hound the way he met every impossible thing in his life. Directly, honestly, with everything he had left. They killed each other. Sword and fang found their marks in the same breath. Tyr fell beside the beast he was destined to fight, and the one-handed god of justice finally rested. Silence. After the fire and the flood and the falling of every star, silence. The kind of silence that exists before creation, and after everything creation built has been taken back. The ocean covered everything. No land, no sky that differed from the sea. just water stretching in every direction, warm and still, holding the memory of 9 realms in its depths. Time passed without anyone to measure it, days that no sun marked, nights that no moon divided. The universe rested the way a field rests after harvest, empty, but not finished, thin green. A single blade of grass broke the ocean's surface, impossible and defiant. It pushed through salt water into air that hadn't existed a moment before. Land rose around that grass like a thought completing itself. Green hills swelling from the water, mountains forming from ocean floor, warm earth drying in new sunlight. This was Idavol, the meadow where the gods had first gathered at the beginning of everything. The same place, the same green. As if the world remembered its own first morning, a new sun crossed the sky, the daughter of the old sun, born before her mother was swallowed. Brighter than her parent, warmer, as if she had learned from the darkness that consumed the first. Eagles circled above the new mountains. Fish leaped in streams that had never been fished. The world was pristine, no wars, no oaths broken, no wolves in chains. Not yet. Footsteps in the meadow. Not a god's heavy tread, lighter, younger. The children of the old gods, walking through grass that reached their knees, blinking in unfamiliar sunlight. Vidar was among them, Odin's silent son, the one who avenged his father by tearing Fenrir's jaw. Modi and Magni came carrying their father Thor's hammer between them, too heavy for one alone. Balder returned from the dead. Hell's gates opened when their keeper fell, and the most beautiful god walked into sunlight he hadn't seen since Loki's cruelest trick killed him ages ago. They gathered on the meadow and looked at each other. These young gods, these survivors. They carried their parents' blood, but not their parents' mistakes. The world was theirs to build. Vidar spoke first. He had found something in the grass, a golden chess piece from the old gods' games, half buried in new earth, the past refusing to vanish entirely. More pieces turned up, scattered across Idavol like seeds, golden tokens from the old gods' council games. The young gods gathered them with careful hands, reading the past in each one. Among the pieces Balder found something else, a stone tablet cracked but legible bearing the Tewaz rune. Tyr's mark, the symbol of justice, carved before the world burned. The young gods did not know Tyr the way the old world did. They knew him as a story, the god who gave his hand, who kept his word, who walked into his own death with open eyes. Vidar traced the Tewaz rune with his finger and understood something his father never fully grasped. Power that sacrifices itself for others is the only power worth building a world on. They decided then, the first law of the new world would be Tyr's law. Not Odin's cunning, not Thor's strength. Justice, oaths honored. Promises kept, the hand given freely. New halls rose on Idavol. Not replicas, the young gods built differently, lower, warmer, with doors that stayed open and no thrones raised above the rest. No high seat. Vidar insisted. The old world ended partly because one god sat above the rest and feared what he saw. The new world would face its fears at eye level. In the mortal realm below, 2 humans stirred, Lif and Lifthrasir. They had survived Ragnarok by hiding in the heartwood of Yggdrasil itself, fed by morning dew. They walked into a world that had forgotten humans. Grass untouched by feet, fruit unharvested, rivers unnamed. Everything waiting for someone brave enough to begin again. Above and below the pattern began again. Gods watching over mortals. Mortals believing in gods. But this time, the pattern carried Tyr's mark at its center. Justice before power. But the new gods also inherited something else from the old world. Questions. Balder sat alone one evening and wondered, would they make new mistakes? Or the same ones in different shapes? Would there be new wolves, new chains? New gods willing to sacrifice their hands, and new gods unwilling to? The prophecies were silent now. The loom of the Norns sat empty. The new world had no prophecy, no predetermined end. For the first time, the future was genuinely unknown, and that was both the most frightening and the most beautiful gift the old world's death could give. Vidar placed the Tewaz stone at the gate of New Asgard. Not hidden, not elevated at eye level, where everyone entering would see it and remember what it cost to learn that lesson. Somewhere, in the memory of the water, in the silence between stars, Tyr's sacrifice echoed, not as a story told, but as a principle the new world breathed, without knowing its name. The hand he gave did not grow back. The trust he broke with Fenrir was never mended. Some costs are permanent, but permanent costs are sometimes what hold permanent things together. Night fell on the new world for the first time. The young gods slept in their open halls, and the stars, new stars, born from the ashes of old ones, kept watch the way Tyr once did. Now let the story breathe. We've watched a world end and another begin. But between those poles lies the part that matters most, the why beneath the what. Return with me to the moment before the binding, before Gleipnir, before the island, to a night when Tyr sat alone and understood what the morning would require. He had both hands then. He turned them over in the firelight, studying the lines, the caluses, the small scars from centuries of swordwork. 2 hands, one decision away from one. What goes through a mind that has chosen its own diminishment? Not bravery. Bravery is what happens when you don't have time to think. This was something slower, something heavier. He could have refused. That's the part the stories skip. Tyr was not compelled. No oath bound him to this. No prophecy named him. He chose. And the choosing is the myth. Every god in Asgard had the same hands, the same courage, the same knowledge of what needed to happen. They differed from Tyr in only one respect. They chose themselves. He chose the world. He walked to the courtyard that final morning the way a person walks to a hospital, or an airport, or a conversation they've been avoiding. One foot after another, each step a small agreement. Fenrir was already awake when Tyr arrived. The wolf's amber eyes tracked him across the courtyard, reading something in the god's stride that words hadn't yet confirmed. Did the wolf already know? Animals read grief in the body before the mind has finished assembling it. Fenrir's ears shifted. His tail went still. Something in the air had changed. Tyr fed him anyway. That last morning, he brought the wolf's favorite, a haunch of boar from Asgard's feasting hall. He placed it at Fenrir's feet with the hand he was about to lose. The wolf ate slowly. He did not take his eyes off Tyr. Between bites, their gaze held, and in that gaze lived every morning they had shared, compressed into one. When the other gods arrived, the spell broke. Fenrir's ears went flat. Tyr's spine straightened. The private world between man and wolf collapsed into the public world of duty. On the boat to Lyngvi, Tyr stood at the prow. Wind pulled at his cloak. Behind him, gods murmured strategy. Ahead, the island rose from black water like a verdict. Fenrir rode in the largest ship unbound, surrounded by nervous gods. The wolf sat perfectly still, watching the island approach with the calm of someone walking into a trap they've already accepted. The island was exactly as desolate as it needed to be. Flat stone, no trees, no shelter. A place designed for one purpose: to hold something the world couldn't contain. Thor produced Gleipnir with theatrical flair. The ribbon caught the morning light and shimmered. Impossibly thin, impossibly beautiful, impossibly dangerous. Fenrir's nostrils flared. The wolf's demand came, a hand as pledge. The silence that followed was the loudest thing the 9 realms had ever produced. Every god suddenly discovered something interesting about their boots. Tyr did not look at his boots. He looked at Fenrir. He looked at the hand he was about to give. He looked at the sky, clear and cold and indifferent, and he stepped forward. Time slowed. Tyr's hand rose. Every god held their breath. Even the wind paused. The space between his fingers and the wolf's teeth stretched into something resembling eternity. His fingers crossed the threshold of Fenrir's jaw. Warm breath. The ridge of the lower teeth against his wrist. The wolf's tongue, wet, alive, pressing against his palm. Fenrir held the hand gently. Not a bite, a clasp. The wolf held Tyr's hand the way a friend holds a promise. Both knew what was about to happen. Neither looked away. The gods moved. Gleipnir rapped. The silk tightened. Fenrir's eyes changed. From trust to understanding to something beyond rage, beyond grief, beyond any word the Norse had. The jaw closed. Not in anger, in justice. Fenrir took what was promised. The wolf honored the agreement the gods had broken. Even in betrayal, the wolf kept his word. Tyr's hand fell to the stone. 5 fingers open, palm up, catching the light one last time before the blood covered them. The god of justice had been judged by the thing he deceived. He wrapped the stump himself. No one offered help, or perhaps he refused it. Leather strips wound tight with his left hand and his teeth, the practical work of surviving loss. Around him, celebration. Behind him, a howling wolf. Inside him, something that would never fully heal, not the wrist, but the knowledge that he had earned both the celebration and the howl. This is the wound the myth is really about, not the hand. The hand is visible, dramatic, easy to carve into stone. The real wound is the one between right and right. 2 justices that cancel each other. Fenrir deserved trust. The world deserved protection. Both statements are true. Both cannot coexist. Tyr's myth lives in the gap between them, and the gap never closes. The Norse did not resolve this tension. They sat with it. They carved Tyr's rune and prayed to him not for easy answers, but for the strength to survive impossible ones. Centuries turned in the mortal world. The Vikings who first carved Tyr's name sailed, built, fought, and faded. But the rune endured, scratched into doorframes and sword hilts and wedding rings. When Christianity came to the north, the old gods retreated into folklore. Thor became a fairy tale. Odin became a ghost story. But Tyr became a day of the week, hiding in plain sight. Every Tuesday for over 1,000 years, the world has spoken a god's name without knowing it. The sacrifice lives in the language like a fossil lives in stone, preserved by accident, powerful by design. The myth survived in other ways too. Icelandic scholars wrote down the old stories in the 13th century. The prose Edda, the poetic Edda, ink preserving what memory was beginning to blur. Snorri Sturluson, the man who wrote most of what we know, was a politician and a poet. He saved the gods the same way Tyr saved the world, by giving up something of his own. His time, his reputation, his safety. Through Snorri's ink, Tyr's story traveled. From Iceland to Denmark, Germany, England. Scholars translated. Poets reimagined. Each retelling added a layer, like rings inside a tree. The Romantics found the Norse myths in the 19th century and fell in love. Wagner turned them to opera. Painters rendered them in oil and gold. Tyr's sacrifice became art. In the 20th century, Tolkien rid the Eddas and built Middle-earth from their bones. Every noble sacrifice in fantasy fiction carries Tyr's fingerprint, or rather, the print of his missing hand. Video games, films. The Norse gods keep returning because the stories they carry are stories we keep needing. Especially the one about giving something precious for something right. And tonight here, in this quiet space between waking and sleep, the story continues. Your ears are the latest in a 1,000-year chain of ears that have heard the wolf howl and the hand fall. The Viking skalds who first performed this tale didn't write it down. They carried it in their voices. Each skald learned the rhythm from their teacher, who learned from theirs. A chain of breath stretching back to the first telling. They didn't just recite, they performed. Different voices for Tyr and Fenrir. Pauses where the audience held their breath. The moment of the bite delivered with a slap of hand on thigh that echoed through the hall. Every telling changed the story slightly. One skald emphasized Fenrir's intelligence. Another lingered on Tyr's grief. A third made the dwarves' forging of Gleipnir into a comedy. The myth was alive because it was never fixed. Some tellings were whispered to children at bedtime. Imagine that, a Viking parent tucking their child into furs, the fire dying, telling this same story to guide them into sleep. Just like now. The skalds are gone, the mead halls are ruins. But every time someone tells this story, in a book, a film, a quiet voice in the dark, the chain adds another link. The breath continues. So Tyr's sacrifice rings across the centuries. But what does it teach? Not a simple lesson. The Norse distrusted simple lessons, something more useful, something harder. The myth teaches that doing the right thing can look exactly like doing the wrong thing. Tyr betrayed his friend. Tyr saved the world. Same act, same hand, same God. It teaches that sacrifice isn't noble if it's easy. The cost has to be real. It has to leave a mark. If you can give something up without grief, you haven't given up enough. And it teaches something about wolves, about the things we fear and chain and punish, and how our fear can create the very danger we sought to prevent. Fenrir was dangerous because the gods made him dangerous. Fed on distrust and chains, the pup became the monster the prophecy promised. The future wrote itself through the gods' attempt to prevent it. Only Tyr treated Fenrir as more than a threat. Only Tyr offered kindness. And only Tyr was willing to pay, when kindness wasn't enough to change what was already in motion. There's a devastating gentleness in that. The god who cared most was the one who had to act against his care. The myth doesn't let anyone off easy, least of all its hero. Consider the question the new gods faced on Idavol. How do you build a world that doesn't repeat the old one's mistakes? How do you honor Tyr without creating new Fenrirs? The answer is the myth itself. You don't solve the paradox. You carry it. You acknowledge that some choices will cost a hand, and you extend your hand anyway. The new world would have its own wolves, its own chains, its own gods standing in courtyards at dawn, making choices that tore them in half. That's what it means to be alive. Tyr knew this. He gave his hand knowing the world would end anyway, knowing Fenrir would break free, knowing his sacrifice bought time, not victory. He did it anyway. That might be the bravest thing in all of mythology. Not a hero who fights to win. A god who sacrifices knowing he will lose, because the sacrifice itself matters more than the outcome. Rest with that thought for a moment. Let it settle like snow on warm ground, not sticking yet, just present. The story will carry it for you while you drift. The new world grew. Lif and Lifthrasir had children who forgot they descended from people, who survived the death of everything. Generations built on generations. New stories were told. New heroes emerged. But in every tale of sacrifice, in every story where someone gave up something precious for something right, Tyr's shadow fell across the page. Vidar ruled the new Asgard with steady hands, both of them. He often stood at the gate where the Tiwaz stone was set and wondered if he could have done what Tyr did. The honest answer was he didn't know. No one knows until the wolf is in front of them and the hand is required. That uncertainty is the myth's final gift. It keeps the question alive. Baldur the returned god became the new world's poet. He composed songs about the old gods, not as legends but as family. He had known them, he had lost them. His song about Tyr was the simplest. Just 3 lines, the wolf, the hand, the silence after. Baldur said those 3 things held everything a person needed to understand about courage. Modi and Magni, Thor's sons, eventually learned to lift Mjolnir alone. But they never swung it without thinking of the god, who chose a different kind of strength. The new world had no prophecy of its own ending, no Ragnarok waiting, no predetermined thread in the cosmic loom. For the first time, the future was a question, not an answer. That meant every choice was real, no fate to blame, no Norns to appeal to. When the new gods made decisions, they owned them entirely, the successes and the costs. Seasons turned in the new world. Spring followed winter, followed autumn, followed summer. Reliable, unhurried, warm. The world breathed in cycles that no wolf would swallow. Rain fell and was welcome. Snow fell and was soft. The elements behaved as elements, not as omens. The new world was learning to be ordinary, and ordinary was beautiful. At night the new stars kept their watch. No wolves chased the moon. No serpent circled the horizon. The sky was just a sky, and that simplicity was the most miraculous thing in it. But the Tiwaz stone still glowed at the gate. Warm light pulsed from it each evening, a heartbeat from a dead god, reminding the living what they'd been built from. One evening, Balder sat by the stone and told a group of young gods the full story. Not the summary, the whole thing. The feeding, the trust, the choice, everything. When he reached the part where Tyr's hand entered Fenrir's mouth, Balder paused. The young gods waited. In that silence, 1,000 years of storytelling paused with them. He told them Tyr didn't hesitate. That was the important part. Not that he was brave, many gods were brave. That he didn't pause at the threshold. Some doors you walk through without stopping. The young gods sat with the story afterward. The way you sit with a meal that fills you differently than hunger expected. Some stared at their own 2 hands. The story did what stories do when they work. It didn't give answers. It gave weight to the questions. It made the young gods heavier and lighter at the same time. Time moved forward in the new world the way time always moves, with the gentle insistence of a river that has somewhere to be. Days found their rhythms, gods found their roles, and below in Midgard humans kept building. Towns became cities, farms became kingdoms. The species that survived the apocalypse proved remarkably good at continuing. They didn't know about Tyr yet, the humans. They would learn, through skalds who would be born, through runes that would be carved, through a day of the week that would bear his name again. The circle would close again. A new people would carve a new rune that looked suspiciously like the old one. They would pray to a one-handed god for the courage to face their own wolves. We still face wolves, not fanged ones, the kind that wear suits, that live in spreadsheets, that hide in diagnoses, that lurk in the gap between what we want and what we can afford. Every day, someone puts their hand in a wolf's mouth. They sign the paper. They make the call. They say the thing that needs saying, knowing it will cost them something they can't get back. Most of these sacrifices never make the news. No one carves a rune for the parent who gives up a dream so their child can have one. No one writes a saga about the whistleblower, or the caretaker, or the friend who shows up. But Tyr would recognize them. The god of oaths and sacrifice would know exactly what it costs to keep a promise when breaking it would be easier. He paid that price in bone and blood. That's why this story has survived 1,000 years. Not because it's exciting, though it is. Because it's true, not literally, mythologically. It describes something real about being alive that no other language can reach. Let the story settle now. You've walked a long road, from Asgard's golden halls to the void after Ragnarok and back again. The path narrows here, the fire. Tyr would tell you not to fight sleep. He'd say there's no honor in forcing your eyes open when the body wants rest. Even war gods know when the battle is over. The new world sleeps too. Every evening, the young gods of Idavul set down their work, bank their fires, and listen to the wind move through grass that grows without prophecy. The Tiwaz stone at the gate still pulses. Warm light. Warm light. Like a heartbeat that doesn't need a body to continue. Above the new world, the constellation shaped like a one-handed man turns slowly. The stars that form his missing hand are the brightest. Absence made luminous. Loss made into light. Somewhere in the new world's first forest, a wolf howls. Not Fenrir, just a wolf. Just an animal singing to the moon because that's what wolves do. The sound is not a threat, it's a lullaby. The old wolves are gone. Fenrir rests. The cosmic chase is over. What remains is what was always underneath the myth. A world that keeps turning. Lives that keep choosing, hands that keep reaching out. Tyr gave his hand so the world could have more time. The time is yours now. Use it for sleep. There's nothing left to decide tonight. The fire in the new world's great hall has burned down to embers. Orange light barely moves on the golden walls. The young gods sleep in their chairs, dreaming of futures they get to write. Outside, the new stars keep their vigil, no horn to blow. No army to watch for. Just the quiet work of shining, of being light in the dark, because that's what stars are for. And the Tiwaz stone pulses on warm, warm. The last heartbeat of the bravest god. Keeping time with a world that learned to be better, because he gave his best. Return one final time. To the island. To the stone. To the moment Tyr's hand entered the wolf's mouth. Because that moment is the center of everything. The axis the whole story turns on. See him. The one-handed god who hasn't lost his hand yet. Standing before a wolf who hasn't been betrayed yet. Both still whole. Both still trusting. The last second before everything changes. His hand moves forward. Not fast. Not slow. At the speed of someone who has already decided and is simply following through. The speed of promise becoming action. The wolf's amber eyes hold his. In them, Tyr sees everything. The pup, the friend, the god who failed to protect, the prisoner, the prophecy, the end. And the world that gets to continue because of this. The jaw closes. The hand is given. The world is saved and broken in the same breath. And somewhere, 1,000 years from now, someone will hear this story and understand. 5 fingers, a palm, a wrist. The simplest tool a body owns. Tyr's myth reduces all of courage to this: what are you willing to hold out and lose? Hands shake on agreements. Hands hold children. Hands build walls and break bread and close around the hilts of swords. To lose a hand is to lose the primary way a person touches the world. Tyr chose which hand to give. His sword hand, his dominant hand. Not the lesser sacrifice, the greater one. The Norse noticed this. Their god didn't offer his spare. An oath in Norse culture was physical. You gripped a ring, a blade, another person's arm. The body sealed what the mouth promised. Tyr's hand was both the oath and the cost of keeping it. Justice is the myth's deepest current. Not courtroom justice, the older kind. The kind that asks, when two truths collide, what do you do? When every option costs something irreplaceable, how do you choose? Tyr's answer was not wisdom, it was action. He did not solve the dilemma, he walked into it. Sometimes the bravest thing is admitting there's no clean answer and acting anyway. The wolf represents everything we chain out of fear, every difficult truth we bind, every uncomfortable reality we restrain, because facing it freely would be too dangerous. And the binding represents the cost of that restraint. It works for a while. But what is chained grows angrier. What is suppressed returns stronger. The ribbon holds until it doesn't. The Norse understood cycles. Winter follows summer. Destruction follows creation. The wolf breaks free and the world ends, but the world begins again. The cycle is not tragedy, it is nature. Tyr sits at the hinge of that cycle. He is the hand that holds the world together a little longer. Not forever. He never pretended forever. Just long enough for the world to be worth the losing. That is enough. The Norse would say that is more than enough. A life spent holding things together, even temporarily, is a life that meant something. Courage in this myth is not the absence of fear. Tyr feared. He feared the loss. He feared the wolf's judgment. He feared being diminished. He did it anyway, fear and all. And afterward he grieved. He didn't pretend the sacrifice was easy. He didn't perform resilience. He sat in his hall and felt the weight of what he'd done, and that grief honored the gift. The myth doesn't end with triumph. It ends with a god who lost his hand, a wolf who lost his freedom, and a world that gained time it didn't deserve. Nobody wins, that's the point. The Norse worshipped a god who lost. In a culture that celebrated warriors and victors, they carved runes for the one who came home with less than he left with. That says everything. It says that the people who told this story knew something about life that comfort tends to erase. The things that matter most require us to give up the things we hold most dear. Tonight you hold nothing. Your hands are empty and resting. For these few minutes, no one asks you to give anything. Just receive. The story is the gift. Sleep is the gift. Rest is the gift. Tyr would approve. The god who gave everything would understand the need to take something back. Rest is not weakness. Rest is the sheath that keeps the blade sharp. The hand that was given bought the world more time. The time you're spending now, lying still, breathing slowly, letting go, is part of what that hand purchased. Use it well, use it for sleep. The one-handed God of justice asks nothing of you tonight except to close your eyes and let the ancient story do its oldest work. Tuesday, say it slowly. Tears Day. Every week, for more than 1,000 years, the world has whispered a forgotten God's name without knowing it was a prayer. He is the quietest legacy in Western culture. No blockbuster films, no theme parks. Just a syllable embedded in every calendar on Earth, hiding like a rune carved inside a doorframe. Thor got the movies. Odin got the mystery. Loki got the charm. Tyr got something better. He got the truth. The god who sacrificed most became the one we speak most often without knowing. Every language that traces its roots to the Germanic North carries his fingerprint. English, German, Dutch, Swedish, Norwegian, the descendants of the people who carved his rune into their swords. He lives in the archetype too. Every story about the quiet one who steps forward when the loud ones step back, that's Tyr. Every leader who takes the cost so others don't have to. The firefighter entering the building, the teacher staying after hours, the friend who drives through the night. Tyr's story lives in every act of costly, quiet, unrewarded faithfulness. He would not want a monument. The god who stepped aside for Odin, who sat alone in a diminished hall, who walked to his death without complaint. Monuments were never the point. The point was the hand, always the hand, extended, given, lost. The simplest gesture carrying the heaviest meaning. A god reduced to a single act that said everything words could not. So remember him on Tuesdays. Or don't, he wouldn't mind. The god of justice doesn't keep score. He just keeps his word, even when keeping it costs him the hand that gave it. His story is almost told. Yours is still being written. Between the two, in this quiet space, the ancient and the living share the same warm breath. Let it carry you now. The fire has found its embers. The story has found its shore. What remains is warmth without flame, the kind that lingers after the telling, after the teller has gone quiet. The stars above the new world turn slowly. No urgency, no chase, just light traveling vast distances to reach the places where people sleep. Wind moves through Idavol's grass. Long, slow strokes, like a hand passing over a sleeping world, smoothing it, settling it, telling it that nothing needs watching tonight. The lake beyond the meadow holds the sky in its surface. Stars below, stars above. No difference between falling asleep and floating among them. An owl calls once from the new forest. The sound dissolves into the dark the way a stone dissolves into deep water. Slowly, completely, leaving only ripples that fade. The aurora stirs above the mountains. Green and violet light moving without hurry, painting the dark with colors that don't need names. Just warmth, just motion, just beauty doing its quiet work. Somewhere in that light, a warmth that has no source. A glow that belongs to no fire, no star, no sun. It simply is, the way rest simply is, when you stop asking it to arrive and let it find you. The Tiwa's stone pulses one last time tonight. Warm, then still. Even the memory of courage sleeps eventually. Even the bravest heart rests between beats. Nothing left to tell. Nothing left to hold. The one-handed God has given his story the way he gave his hand. Completely, without asking for anything in return. It's yours now. Sleep with it. Good night. The gods are sleeping. The wolves are resting. The stars are keeping watch. And you've earned this. Close your eyes. The story will be here when you wake.